Welcome back to Stockpine Public Access Radio. You're listening to Spilling the Salt. I'm Lev Saltzman, and tonight we'll be reading an excerpt from Remington Irons' classic comic novel, Body Sounds. Remington Irons, of course, is an American humorist in the tradition of Robert Benchley, James Thurber, or Mrs. Bombeck. Known across the globe for his vivid and at times absurd descriptions of the lives of the downtrodden and outcast, Irons was a virtual unknown in his lifetime. However, he rose to prominence after the posthumous publication of Body Sounds 3 years after his death at the hands of a wayward combine harvester. Tonight's excerpt begins on page 64 of the amended edition. On this particular balmy July night, Herschel Spongeford was not feeling particularly super. That morning, Jim Croft Jr. had stolen his most accurate slide rule. His apartment complex had been declared a sovereign nation, and he had ripped the stitches of his favorite pair of blue cycling trousers. The only thing that Herschel felt could redeem the day was a trip to the Starfish Club to have one of their world-famous tuna casserole melts. He lumbered down the stairs and entered the seedy club. Inside, the light was dim. Various criminal elements slinked around their designated shadows, and the band was playing the kind of jazz music only the hippest of white people knew about. Herschel ordered his meal from the bar and sat down and ate, while a bawdy performance played out on stage. It took only the duration of a burlesque act set to the tune of the theme of Gilligan's Island before Herschel had reduced the tuna casserole melt to a pile of fishy crumbs. Herschel had scarcely finished his tuna casserole melt when he was confronted by Jim Croft Jr.'s father, who was clearly inebriated. "How dare you? How dare you accuse my son of theft, the very product of my loins?" Jim Croft I grabbed the collar of Herschel's shirt and pulled him to his feet. Herschel's, that is, not his own. Herschel waved his arms defensively. His own, that is, not Jim Croft I. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, sir. I didn't accuse anybody. Your son simply gloated about it in front of the live PA system for the whole college. I would scarcely say that I impeached his character at all." Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. A large man in a raincoat and galoshes had stormed the stage and was firing wildly into the audience. "You dogs, always trying to steal the beer from my bottle." The gunman's accent gave away that he was from some backwater part of Australia, Queensland perhaps, or whatever the state that Adelaide is in is. The drunkard, who was belligerently hounding Herschel until just a second ago, was now frozen in shock. Jim Croft Sr. stood with his mouth agape, his hand still locked around Herschel's collar. Herschel deftly unbuttoned his shirt and leaped out of it, dropping to the floor. Making his way across a carpet made adhesive by decades of spilt drinks, Herschel crawled to the door leading backstage. Herschel burst into the back room, where there was a drag queen eating a couple of bright orange fruits, and a famous pro golfer chowing down on a soup of hacked up chunks of root vegetable. Herschel beckoned to the two nonplussed gourmets, calling out to them in a whispered yell. "There's no time for supper now. There's a gunman out there." The drag queen looked up from their pile of assorted melons and citruses. "Sugar, there's always time for supper." The golfer finished slurping a spoonful of soup before loudly clearing his throat. "Calm down, boy. Have a grapefruit or some French toast." But Herschel knew that they would all be toast if he couldn't come up with a creative and crafty solution to the current predicament. Out of the corner of his eye, Herschel spotted a skeleton costume from a burlesque production of the Book of Revelations, and quickly hatched a scheme. Donning the skeletal outfit, he fashioned the golfer's 5-iron and the drag queen's steel brassiere into a scythe, much to the diner's chagrin. As Herschel stepped out onto the stage, the soundtrack he had cued slowly began to fade in. Tongues of white fog from the smoke machine whisked around the gunman's feet as he first noticed the opening notes of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. The gunman's head whipped around to discover the source of the music, causing him to come face to face with a pale, grinning skeleton. The gunman yelped in surprise like a dog whose tail has been caught in a linguine roller, tossing his shotgun up into the rafters. "Who dares interrupt happy hour, the most sacred of all profane rituals?" The Grim Reaper's voice boomed from every corner of the building, as if emanating from speakers positioned throughout the room. The gunman turned pale as a milky white sheet. "Sorry, sir, it was an accident. I didn't mean to violate the sanctity of happy hour." The Grim Reaper raised up his peculiarly shaped scythe, preparing to bring it down on the gunman. "No, please," the gunless gunman begged. "If you let me go, I won't ever come back. I promise." The Grim Reaper raised a skeletal finger to point at the gunman. "Very well, I shall let your insolence off with a warning. But if I ever run into you at some dark ritual, like a Black Mass or the Republican National Convention, I shall drag ye to hell myself." At that, the gunman bolted out of the club, and it wasn't until 6 months later that he would be found hiding out in the smallest state in America. At the time, he was still ranting about how the Grim Reaper was coming for his soul. The Grim Reaper turned off the lapel microphone that was pinned to his cloak, letting his improvised scythe fall to the ground in a clatter. As Herschel tore off his skull mask, he was mobbed by a crowd of appreciative patrons that had been hiding out in the ladies' washroom. He received a heartfelt thank you from a British woman and an appreciative nod from the still partially petrified Jim Croft the Elder, who had forgotten all about his son's besmirchment. Herschel bounded up the stairs and out of the Starfish Club with a spring in his step. To his surprise, after the ordeal with the gunman, he was now feeling the opposite of down. He was feeling super. No, better than super. Better than mega even. And that was an excerpt from Remington Irons' classic comic novel, Body Sounds. I can't count the number of times I've read it cover to cover. Well, it's getting late, dear listeners, and that's all we have time for in this installment of Spilling the Salt. Tune in to the next episode of Spilling the Salt for a retrospective on the protagonists of Tolstoy, from Mr. Bezukhov to Mrs. Karenina. This is Lev Saltzman with Stockpine Public Access, signing off. But coming up next, The Real Scoop with Marilyn.
Blessed morning, my sweetie pies. Just a little pie joke for y'all. I've got a very special episode coming up for you today, but unfortunately we do have to start off on a serious note with regards to last week's episode. Now, I must say I do not appreciate the comments being leveled at me about the recipe that I used yesterday. I'd like to remind everyone that the recipe of the day was voted upon by listeners, and I was personally unaware that cream pie referred to an sexual act, and was unaware that some of my commentary may have been construed as lewd. I believe that we may have some smart Alex in the audience who may have rigged the election for the recipe of the day. I will therefore no longer be taking audience votes. Unfortunately, the actions of a few bad faith actors have ruined it for the rest of us once again. Anyway, enough of all that. For today's recipe, we are going to go back to an old family favorite of mine, and especially special on account of it almost being the Stockpine Falls Fall Pumpkin Festival in a couple days. That's right, we're going to be making Grandma Bates's famous blue ribbon pumpkin pie. So, we're going to start with the pastry. You're going to need 1 cup of plain flour sifted into a large bowl. Then we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon baking powder, a pinch of salt, and we're going to mix them all up together. Next, we're going to add 1/2 cup of chilled butter diced up into little cubes. Although I like to add a little bit more, you can never get too much butter, as my Ben used to say before I lost him to a heart attack, poor dear. Then we're going to rub the butter into the flour with our fingers until it resembles coarse breadcrumbs. Get as many fingers in there as you can. You know, this is one of the favorites we used to sell at the diner before it closed. Some people ask me, Marilyn, they say, how do you cope with losing your diner? And well, I cope just fine. You know, I've got my beautiful family, Jason and Ellie, to help me through it. My son, Jason, I'm so proud of him. He's got a wonderful job at a law firm and a beautiful new fiance who I still need to meet, Jason. And of course, there's Ellie, and she could be successful too if she just tried a little harder and maybe put on some lipstick once in a while. But you know, it's not easy. It's not easy. It changes your worldview. You think people want good food, good service, good coffee, and then someone else comes along and tells you no, what they actually want is an arguably sentient grizzly bear preparing their food. Well, that's all right. That's all right. It's all part of God's plan. All right, now we're adding the liquid. That's 1 egg yolk, a tablespoon of castor sugar, 2 tablespoons ice water, and a squeeze of lemon juice. Beat that up and add about 2 tablespoons to the dry mixture. More if you need, more if you need. Mix it in with a butter knife, and when that stops doing anything, you've got to get in there with your hands. Just get all that anger out. Okay. Now that's all together, we're going to let it chill in the Frigidaire for about 30 minutes. Meanwhile, let's get our pumpkin ready. You're going to need 2 cups of mashed pumpkin, 1 dessert spoon of corn flour, 1 cup of white sugar, 1 teaspoon each of ginger and cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon each of nutmeg and allspice, 3 eggs, and 1 1/2 cups of milk. And this is the easy part, you just mush them all in together. Oh, I almost forgot. For those new listeners, I'd like to extend a warm welcome and also to congratulate you for finding us, considering how small and pathetic the advertisement of certain Mr. Jensen allotted this little show was. Especially when he was asked to provide us with a nice half page. Fans of the show will know Jeffrey Jensen and I have no love lost, well, that's no secret. We've got our irreconcilable differences. He claims that I'm a harasser and has taken out a bogus restraining order on me, and I claim that he's a sugar thief, a liar, a communist, and a pervert. Yes, a pervert, and I have evidence for that. Go have a look at his message board posts about that sinful show Valley of the Dolls if you don't believe me. I've never seen a man that obsessed with a Barbie doll before, and if that doesn't give you pause about his competency running our trusted stock daily, then I don't know what will. All right, time to roll out our pastry. And now you're going to want to give your pumpkin custard a good whipping right before it goes in the oven, otherwise it'll split, and nobody wants that. And there we go. That needs 395 degrees Fahrenheit, or 200 Celsius if you're from the old country like Grandma Bates, for about 45 minutes, or until it stops jiggling. You can just jiggle it to check. And there's your blue ribbon pumpkin pie. Thanks for joining me on this gorgeous day. I'm Marilyn Bates, and remember, you are the apple of my pie. God bless.